Okay, Daniel, I need to admit something to you.
What's up?
So I know we sometimes tend to get like deeper into what I'm about to go into at like the end of the episode, but I just kind of want to get this out in the open, out like out now. Um,
Okay.
Annihilation Part Two, final part. Welcome to Sad Boys Book Club. My name's Dusty.
And I'm Daniel.
Um, this book was not for me. I've come
Yeah,
to
I mean,
feel.
I I kind of ended that way as well. I mean, obviously, I was a little more vocal about it at the first part than I think you were at first, but I it's not a bad book. I'm not gonna hate on it or say it's bad. It just didn't connect with me really.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. To where it's like, if like looking at it from a technical standpoint, from a writing standpoint, from a pacing standpoint, all the things that make up a book, I really don't have anything negative to say about it. It just didn't really didn't really hit for me in my personal preference for it. So like, it's one of those things where it's like, objectively, I feel like this book is like an 8 out of 10. Maybe you can make an argument if it really clicks with you, it'd be like a 9 or higher. For me, it's like, and I'm throwing my rating out right here at the start. For me, it's a 7. It's a 7 out of 10 for me, and that's just purely my personal enjoyment factor of it. If I had to talk about it from a technical standpoint, from a writing standpoint, looking at it objectively as the writing itself, it's closer probably like an 8 to a 9. But for an enjoyment factor, it's like a 7 for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a shame. It's everything about it should have worked for me. Everything about it seemed, pretty interesting. It seemed pretty, like the setup and the genre and like all the stuff seemed like it was going to be something that I would like, but just for reasons that we'll probably talk about as we get into it, and also reasons that I can't fully put my finger on. It just didn't really work for me.
yeah, I do one thing that I will say that I liked about it. I liked, yeah, I kind of said this kind of a second ago, but I liked the pacing. Honestly, I thought it was very well paced, and I thought that the way that VanderMeer kind of cut in with the flashbacks or like the segues and all that, I thought it fit really well, and they did a really great job of kind of contextualizing the for lack of a better term, present day story that was being told.
Mm-hmm.
So it did a great job of framing what she was going through in Area X, and having some situation that happened to her prior, either with her husband or with her job prior to meeting her husband. That did a great job of kind of having a bit of a for lack of a better term, a real world metaphor to what she was dealing with inside of Area X. And I liked that. I thought, it was really well done. Like, VanderMeer did a great job, and I did find those bits entertaining. But I think for me personally, what kind of hurt my personal enjoyment of it, and I really need to stress my enjoyment. It's once again, it's nothing about the book specifically. It's just my response to the book that is, I guess, the problem. Was, I guess, I just never really truly got invested in the story that was being told. The mystery was there, and it was engaging. The twists were there, and they were good. But it's kind of like you said. It should have worked for me, like for what I'm into and what I like. But I guess it was just the perfect storm of things that I like coming together to make something that I didn't like. I don't know. It's very weird. I didn't hate it. I'm giving it a 7. Like, I gave Lightlark a 6, and I'm like, man, that book was fun. I enjoyed the hell out of it, and I gave that a 6. So, like, I gave The Stranger a 7. It's just kind of one of those things, A 7 is, to me, is not maybe what it is to someone else. It's not an indictment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I think part of it might be that I think it was hard really for me to get super invested in the characters. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know.
I can understand that. For me, the lack of character with the characters was not a deterrent. Um, Obviously, the only real in depth look we get with anybody is the biologist and her husband. Everyone else is about as much as we see of them because it's all told through the perspective of the biologist. So it's understandable that what we get for the other three scientists is not really anything more than just that surface level, one dimensional view that they show to the biologist in the couple of days that they spend with her, all things considered. So that's fine. I don't have an issue with the characterization personally, but it didn't hurt the book for me, but it didn't help it either. So it was just kind of a
I will say
indifference.
To VanderMeer's credit, I did say at first, especially when we were discussing those first two chapters, that the biologist was essentially a nothing character. There wasn't a lot going on there. I think he did in the last part of the book. He really fleshed out that character. So, I mean, there's nothing inherent. There's like no law of writing that says that you need to especially front load your characters. I mean, it's okay to develop them as they go along, but one of the pitfalls, and maybe why it didn't quite click for me, was because there was just not a lot for me to grab onto with really any of the characters. Because let's think about some of the other books that we've read. For example, House of Leaves. I think that is probably the most apt comparison of all of the books that we've read. I mean, maybe you could think of other ones, but House of Leaves, like, immediately, the characters are very vivid. They're very three-dimensional. They're very realized, Like, every character you care to name, Zampano, Johnny Truant, Karen, Navidson, all of those characters are all very real and very vivid. There's a bunch of different characteristics of them, and and you could pretty much get most of their characterization within a few pages of meeting them. And that really wasn't the case necessarily with this book. Like through the end, it's there could be something to be said for, like, I mean, House of Leaves is a lot longer than this. Like, we did sections of House of Leaves that were the length of this entire book. So I mean, perhaps it is not a truly fair comparison, but do you kind of know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. No, I get you.
But yeah, I think it's there's a lot of good things about the book. I think, like you said, I think that the twists are interesting and the mystery, like, all of these things are kind of interesting to me in the abstract, but there's just something about his specific execution that just didn't quite land. But I think we've covered that. Maybe if we have other thoughts about that, we can hit them as we go along through the book.
Maybe it's the way in which the story is told, because something that we get definitive answers to at the very end of the book is that we are reading her journal. This is 100% her journal. Mm-hmm. And she says, she says, I spent the last 4 days recounting everything that's happened to me into this journal that you're now reading, yada yada yada. I'm gonna go do this, yada yada. And then that's like the end of the book. So it is very much. We talked about it last time. It's been like 3 weeks, so I've forgotten once again what it's called when it's first person and it's done in a journal style.
Epistolary.
Epistolary. Thank you. So yeah, we can confirm 100% that it is her journal. It's not just some stylistic it's like it's a journal, but it's not. It's still like an omniscient first person retelling that's done in a style of a journal, but no, it absolutely is 100% her journal we're reading. So, maybe it has something to do with that because the way that you tell a story with that form of point of view, it severely limits what the reader is, what kind of knowledge the reader has access to, and what framing the story is told through, because it all has to be done through the narrator, which in this case is somebody who we only get their perspective on, and we only get their interpretation of the events. We can try and extrapolate from that, like if, for example, we can try and pull more from the crawler, her interactions with the crawler in chapter 5, than how she describes it to us. But at the end of the day, we are kind of pigeonholed into what she saw based on how she understands what she saw and how she understands the situations that she's been put in. So it kind of, I guess it kind of narrows, not necessarily interpretation, but it narrows the scope in which you can interpret. You know what I mean? So maybe that's why.
Yeah, I can see that. I think that's one thing that, for example, Dracula, which again we definitely need to do, does in a better way because you get different perspectives from different there's just so many different perspectives that you're encountering as you're reading it. I think that is, maybe there's something to what you're saying, and maybe that gives us a more well-rounded look at the situation at hand. Whereas this is, as you're saying, just the views and reflections of one person, especially given her sort of vantage point of the world.
Yeah. So I kind of want to break the mold a little bit and like not do this in a more traditional sad boys kind of structure that we've been covering books recently, because I just don't really feel like this one has really fit that. Because similarly, I feel like if you look at how we've been covering books this year, there's been a pattern on how we do it, but the exception to that has been House of Leaves, which was our first one, so we were still kind of like finding our format and our style, which I'd argue we still kind of are. But it feels like from Leviathan Wakes through The Shining, we had like a pretty set kind of structure that we followed week to week on how we just kind of covered the book, and we kind of did last week as well. And I can't help but feel like that's not going to fit this book that well. So I kind of want to fall back into our House of Leaves style of doing this, and I just kind of want to. I just want to blitz through the plot and maybe talk about the kind of themes and ideas a little more than just, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So like, to just really kind of wrap it really quickly, the general plot, more or less, I'm gonna skim the hell out of this. This is like the Spark Notes of the Spark Notes. Chapter 3 is basically about her deciding to go. Where we left off at the end of the chapter 2. She has left the surveyor at the base camp, and she's heading to the lighthouse to try and find the psychologist, because the psychologist left them for dead inside the tower. So it's her going to the lighthouse, chapter 3 is, and she's experiencing Area X as a biologist, and I do like the walk to the lighthouse. I love the way that VanderMeer was describing Area X, the way that nature kind of had reclaimed whatever that area used to be in terms of civilization. That was really good. The way that her sentences.
I will say, I don't want to like derail us, but just maybe put a pin in this idea. That was a strong moment, and that's kind of what VanderMeer is strongest at when he's in the book. Is describing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I really like the flashbacks too. I like the story that was told with the flashbacks and her day-to-day stuff. But it was I do like that section, getting to the lighthouse. She gets to the lighthouse, and I do love the tension. I like chapter 3. I thought chapter 3 was good. The tension that was created, building up the threat, the unseen, unknown threat of the lighthouse that seemed to be, on the surface you think it's the psychologist, but you feel like there's something deeper, something more unsettling, something more I don't want to say Lovecraftian, but in a similar kind of vein. There's some deep under the surface threat that's adding tension to the lighthouse when she gets there, and when she's navigating it, she's clearing all the rooms. She sees the bloodstains on the wall, the shell casings that the bullet casings that are all over the floor that have also kind of been swept aside. And she goes up to the top, and she finds the trapdoor that has all of the journals from the previous expeditions, which is way more than 12. It accounts for way more than however many people would be there for the 12. And that was a nice twist. That was a great twist. That it was like, okay, we've had this idea that maybe the Southern Reach is not giving them good info, and the psychologist has been one of the bigger smoking guns of that. The psychologist is in on something more with the Southern Reach. We can suspect that there's more going on than meets the eye. Da 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 da. This journal pile was great, and I know when I was reading it, and she was like, and I opened it, and there was a pile of journals. It looked exactly like mine. My first thought was, oh God, where's her husband's? It's got to be in there, and it was.
Yeah.
So she grabs it. She doesn't read it, but she does a lot of reading. She spends a lot of time in there doing that. And then as she's getting ready to leave, she goes and looks out over the light keeper picture is important too. She finds a picture of the previous lighthouse keeper, and she pockets the picture, and she feels like she's not the first one to do that, and she won't be the last person to put it back when she eventually does. Seems like some sort of ritual that she's found herself kind of stuck in, that she's doing like almost subconsciously. But then also the lighthouse is really fortified. There's a wall on the seaside. There's like a wall on the island side. There were like siege defenses for the lighthouse, and that's kind of led to, like I said, it kind of builds a lot of tension. And when she goes and looks out over the lighthouse, she looks down and she sees the body of the psychologist on the beach. And that's where the present day storyline ends in chapter 3. I think also in chapter 3 is when we get that's when we get the flashbacks of her college job, where she had the grant, where she was going out to the bay, and she had the tidal pools.
Yes.
Yeah, and I really like that bit with her going to the tidal pools, and it's her just kind of getting into her work. She's ostensibly she's living her life through the tidal pools, like the creatures and the sea life, the whatever, the aquatic life that exists inside the tidal pools, and she's spending all of her time there. She's kind of going away from what her grant is supposed to be, and she understands that this is a fleeting temporary setup, and so she's just kind of trying to enjoy it while she knows it's to quote a great line from the finale of The Office. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember exactly what it was. It was Andy. He says something like, I wish you knew that you were in the good old days while they were happening. And it seems like she's aware of that, so she's just kind of like trying to pull the most out of this, even though she knows that it's going to end eventually. That was a good scene. I really liked that one. We get another scene with her and her husband, and how her husband calls her Ghost Bird because she's always not really fully there with him, even when she is. I really like the way that he.
I still think that's kind of a whack nickname, though. I gotta be real here. That's a whack nickname.
Yeah, I mean, I ain't gonna judge it too bad, but I've heard better and I've heard worse. But it's their dynamic, so I can at least appreciate the uniqueness of it. But I do like. I do like the way that he wrote her relationship with her husband. I feel like it is a great way of showing how a relationship can break down, not because of external issues and not because of like cheating or anything, any like stereotypical relationship kind of like drama breaking down, like wait, no, I can explain. Oh, no, you were a bad person. But if you take the 30 seconds to explain, it's like, oh, okay, I understand. I'm not mad at you after all. None of that nonsense. It's just kind of two people that are in love with each other, but they're not in love with each other in the way that is going to be compatible for them long term, and they're slowly starting to figure out that.
Yeah, I was going to say they may love each other, but they're not really right for each other.
Yeah, and their lives.
It's like the quiet breakdown. It's not like a big dramatic like conflagration, screaming match, throwing plates at each other kind of like breakdown. It's just like you're slowly seeing two people kind of coming to the realization that they are in an untenable situation. It's like the ground is kind of like washing away out from under them, and they're kind of being swept away by different streams.
Yeah, they're trying to fight the tide as it's coming in, but there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, maybe not trying to fight completely. It seems like she's weakly fighting. Like, no, don't.
She's kind of checked out a little bit.
Yeah,
but that's kind of her want, is being a little bit emotionally checked out.
Yeah, which you were saying earlier that you thought that she was a nothing character in the first two chapters, and I would argue that she is still a nothing character by the end of the book. But we get the context of her being a nothing character, which enriches her nothingness, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I guess that's kind of fair to say, but yeah, that it's just like whereas it was kind of like it felt like a weakness of the writing, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm not one to judge in this particular instance, but what felt like a kind of a flaccid and uninteresting character, he comes through on the back end, and he kind of like you get a lot more context for her and a lot more appreciation for why she is the way she is, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so chapter 4, the general plot of it is her making it back to the base camp from the lighthouse after interrogating the psychologist. Once again, I'm just going to really quickly skim this, and then we can maybe talk a little more about some of the details. The general plot is she interrogates the psychologist before she dies, and then makes her way back to the base camp before having a fatal encounter with the surveyor, who is now not necessarily gone mad, but has a situation that has caused her to not trust her at all even more. So she has to kill the surveyor, and then it's just kind of her... The present day chapter ends with her back at the base camp and just basically planning her next move. I'm trying to remember what the...
I do want to throw out here that the surveyor has noticed the changes in the biologist that have been brought on by the spore infestation thing. She mentions that she's... What did she say? Did she say, like, you're on fire or something like that? Or you're glowing? Or it was something like that. So the point, that's kind of one of the things that we, the weakness of the single perspective epistolary format here. She seems relatively non-committal. Like, she'll occasionally remark on some certain things, or she'll be like, I don't know if the reason I did that was because of the spores or not. She'll say things like that, but she doesn't really remark on her specific physiological or behavioral or those, well, outside of what I just said. She doesn't really mention a lot of her changes, but crucially, in her interactions with the psychologist, who tried to use a code word to get her to kill herself, which is where we get Annihilation from, and also the way that the surveyor reacts to her presence, it's fair for us to interpret that the biologist is looking no longer fully human.
Yeah, and we do get a start of that transformation in chapter 3 as she's making her way to the lighthouse. So it's we get more of it building in chapter 4 and a little more in chapter 5 as the story progresses. But yeah, she is starting to transform into something that is affected by Area X, and I don't know if it is 100% from the spores that she inhaled in the tower, or if it's a combination of that as well as just the effect that Area X has on people in general, because I can believe it's a little bit of both at this point.
I suspect that it is the spores are acting as a catalyst or an accelerant in the process, but it is the inevitable result of being in Area X.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the way you... Well, I just want to throw out, there's certain bizarre fauna that exist in Area X. So there's like a dolphin that has human eyes, um, which may or may not be her husband. We might circle back to that. When she is returning from the lighthouse, she is pursued by this bizarre creature that has a human head and a not particularly well described, but certainly very bestial carapace and body. But again, like there's like a human. Her first indication of it is like the skin of like a human face that she sees it looks like it's growing out of the ground, but she determines is like it was molting, this creature. And there's another one. We'll get to that later, I guess. But like that all that to say, I think what has happened to those people or those creatures is kind of happening in some form or fashion to her, as we see her in 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah. And so, like, her conversation with the psychologist, I feel like is very frustrating because it's like you get a couple of answers, but you're left with more questions. She knows a lot more than she's willing to give out, and we don't really get a huge amount from her in general, other than just kind of the fact that she is changing and she is becoming something that is existing inside of Area X, and is no longer really truly human. And one thing I do find really interesting is the fact that she saw her coming. The psychologist saw the biologist coming from a distance in the lighthouse, which is something that she was thinking about as she was approaching. She was like, "Man, if I'm absolutely a visible target right now." And the psychologist was basically compelled to not be able to pull the trigger and ran and jumped off of the lighthouse out of a fear of her coming for her, which I just find kind of funny, honestly.
Yeah.
It honestly
it was kind of like a dark comedy kind of situation there.
Yeah, it reminds me honestly of the situation that Jack was thinking about in The Shining with the hornet's nest. He's lucky that this happened to him in the winter and not during the summer, because of the whole idea of when you are getting stung by hornets on a roof, you're not thinking about the 80-foot drop, the 70-foot drop, whatever it was that you're about to plunge off of. You're just thinking, get away from this as fast as possible, and so you end up falling 70 feet.
You're exactly right, and with the journals that she encountered, it reminded me very much of like the cache of documents that Jack uncovers in the boiler room there. So I think that comparison. It's interesting that we were both thinking, still thinking about The Shining while we were reading this book.
Yeah, and I'm pretty confident that the spores from the writing on the wall that the crawler writes is a primordial variant of the protomolecule, which means that this book is also a prequel to Leviathan Wakes.
So once again,
the SBUL continues. Or SBLU. I don't know if I said that first or not. Does it UL or LU?
You cut out a little bit, so I couldn't quite tell, but I knew what you're saying.
The SBLU, the Sad Boys Literary Universe. It exists and it continues.
Honestly, it is pretty similar to the proto-molecule in terms of its form and function. Not exactly the same, but it is eerily similar.
Yeah. But yeah, I was pretty disappointed with the psychologist thing. I mean, it tracks. This is not me saying it sucked, like the writing sucked. It was just one of those things where he's like, damn it, why couldn't you have given me more answers, please?
The thing is, there's this quote, speaking of Stephen King, and I forget where he wrote it. It was in some magazine, but it was quoted in the video game Alan Wake. Nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's very little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear. And I think that's kind of what he was going for, is like that idea of like giving, and that's kind of true of like that style of like weird fiction, that sort of Lovecraftian thing, like giving you just enough, but to really tantalize you, but not really digging too far into the specifics, or obscuring, in the case of Lovecraft, deliberately obscuring the specifics. But again, there was just something, the execution just didn't hit for me, and so instead of it being like a making it more mysterious or more scary or titillating or whatever, that you can say about a King novel or some of the works of Lovecraft. It was just, I was kind of more in your boat, where you're just kind of like, okay, I really just I don't know what's going on here, and it's kind of frustrating me a little bit. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I didn't read it well enough, but I feel like if we both kind of came away with that feeling, maybe there's something to it.
Yeah. And I do feel like I don't really feel like we should take anything that the biologist says as absolute fact. I think it's kind of a little bit of obfuscation, because she is trying to still find a way to, even in her dying moments, if not kill, disrupt the biologist. I know initially she's trying to she shouts out annihilation, annihilation, and those are apparently kill words for the psychic manipulation, the hypnosis. Annihilation is supposed to be a trigger to cause whoever hears it to shoot themselves in the head, basically. And because she has been able to be broken out of the hypnosis because of the spores, it has no effect on her. But she does find on the psychologist a sheet of paper that has all of the triggers on it, which I thought was kind of funny.
That was kind of like an amusing, like there was. It's been too long since I've read. I'm gonna pull the curtain back here. This episode is coming out quite a bit after the first one, because of a bout of ill health on my part. So my memory of these chapters is not as fresh as it probably could or should be. So, there was a couple though that, for anybody that may be interested in this book or possibly has read this book, you might remember. There was a few that were kind of like darkly amusing.
Yeah, I think the only real bit we get in terms of her flashback is just the story of her husband telling her that he's gonna join the expedition, and how it's like she's kind of mad. She's mad at him, but she doesn't really do much to stop him at the same time. And it's I don't know. I think it's a combination of how she is also kind of understanding the futility of the relationship, and how they both kind of checked out and are just kind of going through the motions, but kind of slowly approaching an exit, and also just kind of her remarkably antisocial nature. It just kind of causes her to, she's mad, but she doesn't really act on any of her emotions externally, which is maybe one reason why he decided to take the expedition in the first place. So I don't know, but yeah, not a huge amount going on there. I don't know how deep I want to talk about the trip back to the surveyor, because like there's moments where she like finds a mask that she thinks is an actual human face at first, but it's a mask, but it might be been made of human flesh.
Yeah, I think in my description, I covered it enough.
Yeah, and then like the whole her being chased by the creature that was making the howling noises that we heard throughout chapter 1 and 2. Fun little action sequence. Not really a lot going on other than it's just her dealing with the threats that exist in a physical sense inside of Area X. But I think the more important bit is just her final encounter with the surveyor, because the surveyor, isn't it that she encountered the anthropologist, right? Like it was like she encountered the anthropologist and had to kill her or something like that. Am I remembering right?
I thought the anthropologist was already dead.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing about it. Yeah, she had left a note saying the anthropologist tried to come back, but I took care of her. So as she's kind of making her way, she's almost to the base camp, and I love how she has a spider sense at this point, because she just kind of gets this kind of like a, she gets a little Peter tingle, and she dodges to the side, and so she only gets shot like, oh, it's either like in the side or in the shoulder, and her spider like reflexes and spider strength and spider agility allow her to essentially roll down into a ditch, as the surveyor comes up and is shooting at her, and she's like, I see you for what you are. You're not human anymore. You're coming for me. I'm gonna take you out before you take me out. Basically, just kind of. It's not so much that she went crazy. I don't think. I think there might be a little bit of mania involved, but I think a lot of it is just because she has come to see the changes that Area X brings. She's finally seeing it. Maybe it's because the psychologist is dead, that maybe the hypnosis is broken or something. I don't know. This is speculation on my part, but basically she sees the biologist as more of a threat than she was before, and now she's trying to kill her, and feels really anticlimactic because the surveyor used to be in like the army or the Marines or something. I forgot what, and she gets tricked with the biologist crawls around to try and flank her, and then slops off a little handful of mud, which causes the surveyor to poke her head up, and then she shoots her in the head. And I'm like, well, that was anticlimactic. I was expecting a little more.
They said she was in the military. They didn't say she was good at the military.
I mean, fair.
She didn't win a SEAL when she was in Army. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. So that's the surveyor taken out. Now the biologist is the only one left. I don't know. There's really not really much to say other than it's just kind of the area axis has really fractured this group and turned them all against each other and forced the biologist to do something that she didn't necessarily want to do but had to do. It was a her or me kind of situation. So whatever. I can't really blame her for it. But when she gets back to the base camp, it's trashed. The surveyor went crazy on it, and she finds a note.
She went Turk and Tantor style. She went Phil Collins.
That was my favorite level in the video game, Trash in the Camp. What a fun game. I know a lot of people hated it, but it was my first N64 game, and I love it to death. Anyways,
great song also.
yeah. Shoo bop shidoo. Great soundtrack. Shout out to Phil Collins. Anyways, it's trashed, and she finds a note that basically says that the anthropologist tried to come back and she took her out, which is something that we'll get into a little more in chapter 5. I think that's one reason also why she didn't trust the biologist anymore either, because it's like, we know that we found her body, the anthropologist, we know she's dead, so now she's coming back, and I had to take her out. So basically, it became a survival. According to the surveyor, as I'm interpreting it, it became a situation of survival to where she could trust nobody except for herself. She could rely on nobody except for herself, and any living thing was a threat to her, which she created that reality. Because I don't think the biologist would have tried to kill her at all, but because she tried to kill the biologist had to kill her in order to save herself. So she kind of created her own villain in that regard out of the biologist. So, self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. I guess it's worth mentioning there were some weird growths on the psychologist that she took a sample of, and when she gets back to the base camp, she tests the samples, and it's like they're human cells. So I don't know. It's not really much to say other than the samples that she's taking, they're all looking human.
The idea of like Area X, it has all these weird freaky mutations, but when we're looking at them, we see that there's like a fundamentally human element to it, and maybe there's something there about like the idea of how humans impact and irrevocably alter the environments into which they come in contact with. That might be something that he was kind of playing at here.
Yeah. And that kind of wraps us with chapter 4. All the samples she has are basically human samples, and now we're into chapter 5, the final chapter, and she basically spends the next day just kind of wasting time because she knows she has to go back down to the tower, but she's just kind of doing everything she needs to do before doing that, and just really trying to draw it out, because it's not that she's afraid of going down in the tower. I think it's because there's some sort of sense of finality to it, and she's just kind of like over preparing, but also just like mentally preparing. So she's eager, but not reckless, I guess, maybe. But
Yeah.
But like, yeah, we get the final bits. I'm just gonna lump all the flashbacks here as I can. We get more of her time during her college grants, where she goes down to the life pools, and I do really enjoy the bit about the starfish that she finds. That was a really nice little bit, and the way that it does kind of wrap around it. This specific bit about the starfish is told when she encounters the crawler in the tower. And I do love the way that it does, like I said earlier, how the flashbacks are used to kind of recontextualize what's going on with her in Area X, and I think that adds a lot to her encounter with the crawler, which I guess we can get into later. Um, yeah, some more interactions with her husband, which gives some more context to her husband's journal that she finally reads, and we learn about what happens with the husband. Um, and I don't know, I really like the husband's story. I thought it was more interesting than hers, if I'm gonna be completely honest. But
What did you find more interesting about him and that story?
uh, I liked the situations that he kind of found himself in, because in the journal he talks about how he was in a group of 8. They all ended up splitting up once they got to the lighthouse. I love how they find the tower and they don't really like do much with it. I think there's a couple that decide that they want to go down. I think 4 of them go down in there. But then like 2 of them go off to go do something else, and then him and I forgot which scientist was with the husband. It doesn't really matter. They go off to the lighthouse, and they travel north from the lighthouse, and they're following the coast, like I guess what they were originally supposed to do. The group of 4 in Expedition 12, and they keep going and going and going and going and going for a week, and they find an island that they can't get, so then they work their way back, and it takes 4 days, and they find just carnage in the lighthouse. They find the dying body of one of the other ones, who's like threatening them, because he's like the surveyor. He's basically thinks that they're gonna try to kill him. Then he's telling them some things, and then but like the really cool thing I found from their story is when they get back, they go to the tower, and they're kind of scoping it out, because they see I think it's like they see someone go into it, and they're waiting for them to come out. But then eventually what happens is they see no. What it was they saw 7 clones of them. All of them except for the psychologist. They see a clone of them, including the 2 of them, the husband and the other scientist that he's with. They see a clone of the 2 of them as well in that group of 7 go down into the tower, and like a beacon of light shoots out of it. And I'm gonna go a little more into an idea that I think what's at the bottom of the tower when we get to that with the biologist. But I am dead set, 100%, no ambiguity, no other interpretation. I'm dropping the hammer on this. The person that came out of Area X, anytime it was reported that somebody just apparently, quote unquote, left Area X, just wandered off and made it back to the real world and back to their families, including her husband, the husband that she found, and if you want to be real, possibly maybe raped after she gave him a shower and sat him down and called the Southern Reach police on to come and pick up, because she realized that he wasn't really her husband anymore. Those are the clones. Those are the clones that went down into the tower. It was not her actual husband, and she agrees with me. She says as much in the book. She says as much in the book that her husband is still in Area X at the end of the book. It's the clones. The clones are the ones that come back. That's why they're changed, because it's not really them. It is a copy of them, and that was interesting.
Yeah, a very loose facsimile.
Yeah, and I don't think, because they were waiting to see them leave the tower, and they never did. And as far as they were watching, they never left. They never saw them leave the tower, and I don't think they left the tower. And I'll get more into that with the biologist going down it. But yeah, I thought the husband story was interesting. He ends it by saying that he's going to keep he leaves his journal, and I love how he's writing his journal as if he's writing it for the biologist. which was a nice little touch, and it shows his love for her, and that's nice. I like kind of like how I like how he wrote their dynamic, where it's like they love each other, but they're in a doomed relationship. But you see his love for her despite who she is, or who she's not really. If we want to get a little more into that, but yeah, he's gonna keep going north, and he's gonna try and go to that island. He's gonna try and repair a boat and go to that island, and that's kind of where he leaves. That's what he leaves his journal in the pile and goes off for that and hopes that she finds it. And we get also a bit before he left to go on the expedition. He's talking to her, and he asks her if she will promise him that if he doesn't come back, she will go look for him. And I'm like, yeah, I like the husband character. I like the way that they wrote him, how they set him up, and how he kind of leans on her, even though she doesn't give him a reason to, with the way that she is. So like, I don't know. I thought the bits with the husband were good. I liked them.
You're kind of talking me into it.
But like after she kind of has her time, I guess, with delaying, she decides it's finally time to go to the tower. Something I was thinking about, and it's something that kind of shows how much she truly has changed. She was shot, I think, like at least once for sure, maybe twice by the surveyor. She was shot by a gun. Like it's nothing minor. Like it doesn't matter where you're shot. If you're shot with a gun, you're gonna be in a bad way. But in the time in between her getting back to the base camp and her going to the tower, which is maybe a day and a half, I think she sleeps twice. So it's like 2 nights in one day. Her wounds have healed enough for her to basically be okay. They're just a dull, throbby ache at that point, and they're not inhibiting her. They never were inhibiting her during her scuffle with the surveyor, but she's basically fine now. And it's like, yeah, that's
she also
human.
mentions that part of like the wounding kind of like slowed down or even slightly reversed her transformation. That is one of the few things she kind of mentions. She mentions like the possibility of trying to keep her for as long as possible might include deliberately injuring herself over and over again, so that she has to sort of regenerate. That kind of, it slows down. Like I said, she kind of says that it slows down or even reverses the weird transformation.
Yeah. But so now we're approaching the end here, more or less, kind of. There's still most of the chapter left, but in terms of the actual plot, it's her going down to the tower, going down as far as she can, especially including her encounter with the crawler, and then she goes back up, spends some days in the lighthouse writing her journal, leaves it on the pile, and then proceeds to go north after her husband. Not after her husband specifically, but just kind of after, and that. So that's kind of like the rest of the book. But to kind of dig a little more deeper into it, her expedition down in the tower one last time is kind of interesting, but I really only kind of want to talk about 2 things about it, unless you have something else you want to talk about, and that's her encounter with the crawler and the endless hallway going downstairs.
The 5.5-minute hallway.
Yeah, you know what I'm thinking about that it reminds me of is that hallway, the staircase going down in Silent Hill 2. And it being it being like, I think it's like timed. I don't remember if it's how they programmed it in the game. If it's I think it's a timing thing. I think you have to be in the hallway for a certain amount of time before the stairs finally end. So you can stand there for like however long it is and then run down, and it's not that long of a staircase. But if you just continuously run down, it seems like an endless staircase. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I've played Silent Hill 2. But it reminded me of that bit. And what a great bit that was in that game.
Yeah.
But yeah, her encounter with the crawler is interesting to say the least. I really like the way it was written. It was very vivid. It was very interesting. And I have a theory as to why she survived her encounter with the crawler as opposed to the anthropologist who did not.
Lay it on me, Jack.
I think the fact that she had the picture of the lighthouse keeper in her pocket is what saved her. because as I understand it, I don't want to go too deep into the what's and hows of what happened, because it really is kind of a lot, even though it's not a long section of basically her.
It is kind of the equivalent of the Stargate sequence in 2001, kind of.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty fair comparison. A lot of light, a lot of pain, a metaphor of drowning in, like, literal drowning underwater, but in light, which I thought was really good. I thought it was a good section. I enjoyed it. But the fact of the matter, to kind of like not really go too deep into it, is the crawler sees her, pulls her into its essence, more or less, and judges her, finds her a, I guess, an acceptable entity. She does not fail, and it does not kill her, but it shoots her out past it and further down the stairs. It was a good section, and this is like I said, where we have the flashback of her talking about going back to the tidal pools while she was drunk and seeing the starfish and being transfixed by it as it was flowing through it, and that's kind of what the crawler is, and how it doesn't have any defined shape, and she's wondering if it's kind of how she's seeing it as it's coming in and out of essentially existence in front of her, whether or not she feels like if it's her eyes playing tricks on her, or if it is making her, it is creating an illusion in her mind of what she sees. It was an interesting section. I liked it. Clearly, something about her is deemed, I don't want to say worthy, worthy of not being murdered, I guess, by the crawler, and she's allowed to ostensibly pass, and now she's on the other side of it and can continue further down into the tower. I guess most of what I want to talk about the crawler is going to have to be on the return trip, because it's going to involve me going into the lighthouse keeper. But then as it continues going down, the staircase stops spiraling and becomes just a downward staircase, and she realizes that the stairs have the same like width and kind of make and feel as the stairs in the lighthouse, which I have a theory about that too. But as she's walking down, she sees it's a doorway that's kind of like of a hazy light, and as she's getting further and further down it, she's starting to kind of feel a physical kind of toll on her, and she ends up stopping and sitting there, and she realizes that walking down the steps, even though she estimates it about 500 to 600 steps left, and she's walking down these stairs in the straight down after it becomes this straight narrow hallway of staircase. She's walking down it for like an hour or two, I want to say. And she's almost to the bottom at this point. Like I said, she only has like 500 or 600 steps, which is a lot, but not as much
relative to what she's already come, you know.
Yeah, and she realizes that because she's already kind of gotten sick going down it, she realizes that she will not survive these final steps. There is some force that's being exerted on her the further down she goes, and she will die before she makes it to the bottom. So she makes the decision to turn around and head back out, and that kind of gives her some relief. I have a theory about this hallway. It shares the way that she describes that kind of doorway of hazy light at the bottom is very similar, if I remember right, how she described the barrier in which they entered Area X when she turned around to look back. So I do think it is somewhat of an exit to Area X, and I do think that is how the clones leave Area X, is through that door. As to it being similar, the staircase, to the lighthouse, I think that it is a bit of a they are like antitheses of each other. So like the tower is, I don't want to say it is the inverse of the lighthouse going into the ground instead of above ground, but I do think that they end up becoming opposites at that point, to where she is in the like nega lighthouse, if you'll allow that, the anti lighthouse.
I won't, but we can continue anyway.
But yeah, I think that's kind of what it is. It is the literal and metaphorical, or I guess the literal and figurative opposite of the lighthouse at that point, especially at that point. And whereas
it's like even in a very literal and mechanical sense, like the light, instead of the light being at the top, spinning around. The light is at the bottom, under the ground, and like in all ways, literal and figurative. It is sort of the inverse of the lighthouse.
Yeah, and if I'm right in that being the exit to Area X, or at least the exit that the clones take to escape, it kind of works as an opposite to whereas the lighthouse functions as something that is supposed to lead the ships into shore. It is supposed to be a guiding light to bring them in safely to port. The light at the bottom of the staircase is supposed to be a guiding light to lead them out of Area X. That's at least my theory to it. But there's something that's keeping her from being able to do that completely. And I'm thinking it is the corruption that Area X has placed on her, that the change that has overcome her. So maybe the clones are, for lack of a better term, pure, and that's why they can
Well,
leave.
yeah, that maybe they're more human, and she is at this point. This is going to sound harsher than I intended, but a creature of Area X,
Yeah.
like she is transformed such that she is not maybe no longer able to live in the environment outside of Area X. Maybe that's kind of what's going on there.
Yeah, and I think she's...
Because there is, while Area X is expanding, there is still at this point in the story in the world a very definite and like hard barrier between the outside normal world, such that it is in the Area X world.
Yeah, that being said, though, I do think that Area X exists in a separate reality, or maybe a separate space and time of the real world. Despite sharing a physical space, there is like a different kind of like, what's the term? Is it like a nominal space? I don't know exactly. Because...
I don't know. I don't know physics.
Because with the husband and him and the other scientists, their trip north up the coast past the lighthouse, it took them 7 days before they decided to turn around. And by all accounts, they should have crossed the border out of Area X on the northern end at that point, but they didn't. And it seemed like it just kind of kept going and going and going. But when they came back, it only took them 4 days to get back. And that is, that's a fracture in space-time. That, it's just, they weren't slow walking for the 7 days and then jogging back and that's why it took 4 days. It was it's implied that they were going at more or less the same pace there and back, but there is a 3-day difference. And like I said, if you're traveling for 7 days going straight north, for how big they say Area X is allegedly supposed to, I don't remember if we're given an exact estimate of how big Area X is, but they'd have come out of the border by then. So Area X, I think, exists in its own kind of like I said, forgive me if this is not the right term, but like its own nominal space that exists within maybe the same world that we live in, but it exists on a different plane of that world. And once you enter that plane through the barrier, because the psychologist, when she's talking to her, implies that the barrier is not exactly what the biologist thinks it is, and if she knew the truth of it, the truth of what the barrier is, what the border is, and how they got there, it would make her go mad. So I'm thinking that there is some maybe a little Stargating going on, something kind of similar. So I don't know. I think they're in a different plane of reality.
I think that's probably true. At first I was a little unsure, but yeah, I think you kind of convinced me there by the end. I think they're, and reminded me of things. Yeah, I think there is definitely part of the nature of Area X is distorting the normal laws of physics there.
Yeah, so I think that, yeah, the only reason why the clones can leave is because they are a purified clone of the subjects of Area X, and the originals either kill themselves in the process, or are like the biologist and her husband, in which they just kind of accept their fate, that they are going to be part of Area X for whatever of their lives are left, and they just concede to become a part of it in one way or another. So yeah, I think that's why she can't. That's why she can't continue down the stairs, and why she realizes that if she does, she'll die. Because as she goes closer to the exit of Area X, her life force is now a part of it. She is now as much a part of Area X as any other creature that she's encountered, any other plant life she's encountered. So as she gets closer and closer to the exit, her tether to that life force is being pulled thinner and thinner until eventually that point where she thinks that she would die before she gets there is when it gets snapped entirely. So, that's my theory at least.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So she turns her back and thinks it's time to leave, but she realizes she has to go back through the crawler in order to leave. And the crawler doesn't care about her at all. She's able to go past it as she skirts along the wall just fine. But she turns to look at it as she's leaving, and she realizes that it also has been looking at her. And what she sees now, looking at it, is what she thinks is the face of the lighthouse keeper. And that's why I think that the thing that kept her alive was her having the picture of the lighthouse keeper. It realizing kind of like what kind of person she was, and seeing that her holding the picture of the lighthouse keeper, him seeing himself once again and seeing her with his picture, is, I think it kind of had like a moment of humanity that allowed the crawler to, I guess, deem her unworthy of killing, however you want to word it. And that's what saved her. That's why I think the picture of the lighthouse keeper in her pocket is the thing that saved her, because I don't think there's anything specific about her or the anthropologist that clearly like separates them enough on a level that whatever this creature is would look at one and look at the other and be like, I'm gonna kill you, but I'm gonna let you live. I think it's purely the fact that she had that photo, and I have something else for it as well, and I think that's why she lived. Purely, I think that was essentially the gate pass past the crawler. But yeah, I am curious as to what could have happened to him to lead him to this fate. But maybe it's not him, because I did say that I think that the tower is the literal and figurative opposite of the lighthouse. So maybe it's not the same lighthouse keeper. Maybe the actual lighthouse keeper died years ago, and what is down here, what the crawler is another kind of clone-esque of the lighthouse keeper, but it's the tower keeper, I guess.
I'm inclined to believe, just like I believe like the dolphin may be the husband, and the shrieking creature was once human. I think that is just kind of that is the lighthouse keeper, or was the lighthouse keeper, however you want to look at it.
Yeah, whether it was actually... I think
because, especially because of the function, his function is the same in the inverse lighthouse / tower as it essentially was in the lighthouse. I think that does speak to there's just the similarity there. I think would imply that he is in fact the crawler.
Yeah, which whether or not he is the crawler or if his clone's the crawler doesn't really change, I guess, what I feel and what my point would be. It doesn't really add much. It doesn't change anything other than, I guess, a little bit of context as to like whether or not I think it's him or not. I think, yeah, he's been warped one way or the other into this function of being the gatekeeper of, instead of the lighthouse and the ships coming in, of this inverse lighthouse and the ships, and the ships in this case being the clones or the people in general going out. So yeah, it is a warped kind of anti function of his original cause. So that was interesting, I guess. But yeah, all that's left. Yeah. All that's left in terms of the actual plot is her saying that she went back to the lighthouse, wrote all of this out, and plans to continue north. Not necessarily after her husband. She's not looking for him, and she does not expect to find him. But the idea that she is going where he's gone, and maybe that she might find a trace of him, comforts her and allows her to feel like she is on the right path, and she is not necessarily alone anymore. And she ends by saying, "I will not be returning home." And that's the end of the book. But I should also say she puts she puts the picture of the lighthouse keeper back in his frame, but she puts I guess there was a circle around his head before when she found it, and I think maybe that's why she said that she doesn't think she was the first person to take it. She adds another circle around his head, and I think that kind of creates, and I think she says this as well, that it creates a somewhat kind of cyclical nature Yeah, she does, because she says that she, maybe the 13th expedition's already here. Maybe they've seen her. Maybe they haven't. Maybe she'll see them, and it's just kind of gonna the cycle is going to repeat itself. It doesn't matter if she's actually been the 12th expedition, the 30th, the 100th. It doesn't matter. It's basically just a cycle, and now she has completed her cycle and is now the next spin of the wheel.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of it. She has returned the lighthouse keeper back to the lighthouse, and now the only people that can continue down in the tower safely are the people that are either deemed worthy by the area X is spitting out themselves, or someone that's deemed worthy by the lighthouse keeper because they passed through the, which is the picture itself. It's you bring the lighthouse keeper with you because the light. I got it. So okay, whether or not the lighthouse keeper is the crawler doesn't matter. What matters is that the lighthouse keeper exists to keep the lighthouse functioning so that it can guide the ships in safely to shore, right? So she took the lighthouse keeper with her with the picture. The lighthouse keeper is the reason why she got past the crawler, like I said. But the reason why is not necessarily because the lighthouse keeper is the crawler. It's because she had the lighthouse keeper with her, and the lighthouse keeper is what brings ships safely to shore. It is what is the barrier of safety between life and death for sailors coming in. And because she had the lighthouse keeper with her in their pocket with the picture, it's because he was the one that led her safely through the lighthouse, past the crawler, towards the exit. But it was her being contaminated that was able to stop her from going out completely. So it is the lighthouse keeper, but it's the picture is the representation of him. It is the metaphor of him doing his duty in the lighthouse by being in her pocket. The picture of him in her pocket, it functions as the same thing as him having the light on in the lighthouse and her being the ship coming into shore, and that's why she does it. And that might have been a really, really long-winded, not really well explained of my point, and maybe just me saying the same thing but in a different way, because it's still at the end of the day is me saying that her having the picture is what did it. But it's the why. I think it's the why that changed. Why the picture is what saved her. It's because she had the lighthouse keeper lead her safely. Does that make sense? Did I explain that well?
No, that was great. That was really good. That was probably the most cogent thing either of us have had to say about this book yet. But yeah, I think you're dead on. Honestly,
yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. But that's the story. I mean, there's not really much more to go on unless we read the other books in the series, and maybe I will down the line, but I don't really have a burning urge to personally.
Yeah, I think I'm good for now.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't really have much else to say. Do you have anything you want to talk about the book before we get to wrap up?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
All right. So, final thoughts on Annihilation?
All right. So final thoughts. Book is not bad. Just didn't work for me. I think a lot of I think it was parts of it. There were aspects of it that were very admirable. I thought it was interesting, like the idea of like a female-led science fiction story. I think that's a good thing. Certainly. There's like the writing about like the ecological section. If you're really into that kind of thing, maybe that's a good reason why you might want to pick it up. I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I think personally, and maybe this isn't fair, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. I definitely enjoyed the film better. If you've seen the film is distinct enough that like there are crossover elements that I didn't want to bog our time, trying to be like, oh, in the movie it was this and in the book it was that. I think it's different enough that it's worth looking into if you're at all curious about it. But in my opinion, I think the book or the film was much better executed. But not bad, pretty good. generally, I think if you're into sci-fi and weird fiction, um, you know, I think there's a chance that you would like this. So I don't know. Overall, it was the book. It wasn't bad. It just didn't really grab me.
Yeah. I haven't seen the movie, but my thoughts after finishing the book was basically like, yeah, I can see how this was made into like a probably 2 hour long movie. I totally get it, and I do think that it seems like it would function well as an adaptation. So I will check out the movie.
Here's one thought about maybe it did feel somewhat undercooked to me. One thing we haven't mentioned about this book, or at least I don't think we have, was this book and its two sequels were all released in the same calendar year.
Wow, really?
Maybe even within eight months or something like that. So like it was the idea behind it was kind of to create like an almost Netflix binge like situation for the literary world, and I think maybe that's part of why it doesn't quite work, because there's parts of it that, you know, like Dusty has mentioned, like the story is kind of interesting, at least in the abstract. Like the plot points are kind of interesting. The mysteries, it just like the execution is not. It doesn't quite. It's less than the sum of its parts, and maybe it might have benefited from another pass or another something, you know, during the creative process.
I didn't know that they all came out in the same year. I don't know if it would technically fall under this category. I don't know where the line is, but it definitely felt more like a kind of novella instead of an actual novel.
Yeah,
it's under 200
that's true.
pages.
It is pretty short, relatively speaking.
Yeah, so I don't know if it would qualify or not, but it definitely, yeah. To your comment about it feeling undercooked, it might be because of just generally how short it is. It does move relatively quickly. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know if it's because of the story itself or because of how much fun I just had over the last hour or so talking about it, but I definitely I had, maybe I'm feeling a little stronger about it now than I did when I finished it earlier, but I definitely feel like I had more fun talking about it now than I did reading it, which once again it's not a slight on the book itself. It's just more so my personal like response to the book, because it is well written, it's well paced, and it's got good ideas. It's like you said, it just didn't land with me personally. I did not hate it. I did not love it. I thought it was fine. I don't regret reading it, and I would recommend it if it's something that it fits a niche that you're into. It's just, you know, it's one of those things. It's, you know, I like. I don't know. It's like if you like all of these different toppings on pizza, but then when you put all of those toppings on the same pizza, you don't, and then you don't like the pizza anymore because all of the toppings didn't necessarily mesh well together. You liked all the toppings individually, but it was once you put them all together, it just kind of it became something that was not the sum of its parts and just didn't really work.
Maybe you like all the toppings and the toppings are okay together, but you don't like the sauce and they didn't cook it long enough. It's a little doughy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where the metaphor went, but I think that's kind of where I'm at with it, where it's like I like a lot of the things, a lot of the individual pieces of the book, but when you put it all together, I don't like it as much. I guess I like it more for its parts than the sum of its parts, I guess.
I'm just amused by two American guys trying to describe something. So imagine a pizza. So imagine this food.
Yeah, right. I've been craving pizza for the last couple of days. I don't know if you can tell. But no, I thought it was a good book. I thought objectively it was a good book. It's just subjectively I didn't like it as much as I felt like I should have.
Yeah.
which is a comment on me rather than a comment on the book or Jeff VanderMeer himself.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening to the Sad Boys Book Club. I guess we'll see you next time.
Yep. Take care.